Okay, so let's talk about what's called dissociative amnesia. And the first thing that I'd like to mention is that we're obviously talking about forgetting something significant. As it says here under the clinical description, unable to recall events or information. And the key is that it's more extensive than normal forgetting. But to add to that, we're also talking about a type of amnesia that is not caused by some kind of injury or trauma to the brain. If it is caused by an injury or trauma to the brain, then this would not be classified as dissociative amnesia. It'd be classified as amnesia due to brain injury. So it's really important to differentiate that. But again, we're talking about forgetting, right? A splitting apart of memory from your conscious awareness. Something that's happened to you that's significant and you're no longer able to sort of bring it into consciousness and think about it and remember it. It's important to note that, again, we're talking about forgetting that's far beyond what would be considered normal. And that's sort of a weird gray area because the truth is that we forget a lot. We forget most of our lives. Think about the last 10 years and think about what percent of the last 10 years do you remember? What percent of last month do you remember? So we forget a lot. But with what we call amnesia or dissociative amnesia, we're talking about forgetting something that just can't be explained through what we would consider normal forgetting. And so what we're generally talking about is forgetting an event that's really significant, something that just isn't something that somebody would normally forget. And this is almost always, really, as it says on the slide, typically in response to some kind of event that's really upsetting, often an event that might be labeled as traumatic. For instance, somebody who is sexually assaulted and afterwards they have no memory of the event whatsoever. That's a pretty good and realistic example of how a dissociative amnesia might come about. Now, amnesia comes in many shapes and sizes, thus the subtypes. Sometimes the forgetfulness or the forgetting of an event may be limited to just a specific event or period of time, where that entire event or that entire period of time is forgotten. Sometimes pieces of an event or events might be forgotten, and we call that a selective amnesia. So a localized amnesia, forgetting an entire event or an entire period of time, whereas selective amnesia would be kind of forgetting pieces of an event. Maybe a war veteran doesn't forget, an entire day or an entire week in active combat, but he's forgotten maybe some of the most traumatic moments. So he's forgotten pieces of the event. Generalized amnesia, and this is the least common. It's the least common of the three listed there. Would be somebody who really has forgotten maybe their entire past, or from a particular memory, they've forgotten their past even from that point on backwards. And so it is more of a generalized amnesia, and it is far less common. Most commonly, amnesia will be linked to a specific memory or a specific period of time, and either that entire memory has been lost or pieces of that memory or time period are lost. So to enhance what I'm talking about here, I will actually take a look at a video example of this. This is a clip from a documentary put out by HBO called Boy Interrupted. And within this documentary, there was a perfect example of dissociative amnesia. So let me preface the video and then we'll take a look. So the first thing we're going to see in this video is a woman's description of the day that her fiance committed suicide. So she's going to describe the day that her fiance committed suicide. And after we hear that description, we're then going to hear the man's mother talk, and it's the mother who is experiencing dissociative amnesia. I'll explain more after this first clip.
I think it was a Saturday. We came for the weekend up here, 4th of July weekend. Scott was totally normal, fun, nice. Suddenly, it was a beautiful afternoon, and we said, "Where is Scott?" Scott was not around. I knew something was wrong. So I said to Billy, "Well, I'm going to go to the caretaker's house and see if the gun is still there." Because I knew that the caretaker had guns, and Scott knew that he had guns. So I went there, and Billy went in another direction. I couldn't get inside the house because it was locked. I don't exactly remember, but I knew he didn't have the guns. When I came back, I saw Billy, who came back, and her lipsticks were smeared around her mouth, and she said, "I just found Scott." And she found him in the Jeep, in the car, near the carriage house. And what he had done was take the hose from the vacuum cleaner and put the hose from the exhaust pipe inside the car.
Okay, so as was stated in the brief clip we just watched, the woman named Beatty, who is the man who committed suicide, it is his mother. She was actually the one who found him after committing suicide. And in an interview that we're going to watch now, she's asked to talk about that day. She's asked by the interviewer to describe that day. And well, let's go ahead and watch and see how she responds to that question.
I don't like to think that maybe I wasn't really clued into what was going on, though I probably wasn't, because I wasn't willing to accept the fact that anything so terrifying to me could be on the way. And particularly because Scott didn't seem like an unhappy person. All it tells you is that there is so much more to know about people you love than you can ever really uncover.
What happened that weekend when Scott died?
I don't know. No, I have not the faintest idea. Not the faintest idea.
You found him.
But what?
You found him.
Who found him?
You found him.
I found him. I don't remember doing that. No. What's more, I think I can get along without memory. I don't remember it all.
Okay, and so when Beatty, again, the mother of the man who committed suicide, when she's asked to describe that day, and she's reminded that she's the one who actually found him after committing suicide, her response is a very genuine, "I don't remember that." And so I think here this is a perfect example of an event that's far too critical and serious and important for somebody to forget just because of what we call normal forgetfulness, or just forgetting normally. And so a perfect example of what would be labeled as amnesia. Dissociative